President Julius Maada Bio signed into law the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Act 2022 on Thursday. The law aims to tackle gender inequality and precarious employment for women in particular in the country. It introduces a 30% quota of jobs to be reserved for women in both the public sector as well in private companies. The quota also applies to management roles to prevent using low-level employment to circumvent the spirit of the reform. The law guarantees women 14 weeks of maternity leave along with equal pay and training opportunities. Employers who violate the law can face up to 50,000 new leones per incident as fine. Sierra Leone has one of the lowest levels of gender equality in the world. It ranks 182nd out of 189 countries according to the UN's 2020 Gender Development Index. Human Rights Watch has described the situation in Sierra Leone as one of systematic discrimination against women, with many being fired if they become pregnant. We must end the impunity of violence against women in elections and public life and punish all persons and entities found guilty of such violence, President Bio said during the launch. Women are underrepresented in politics with only 18 seats and 146 seats parliament being held by women, and with only 5 women present in President Bio's 29-member cabinet. The new quota would also apply to the parliament. Women who wish to serve in public office and their supporters may not be undermined, belittled, intimidated, or humiliated. The president, who is running for re-election in June, said during the signing, it is not going to be easy because that space has been occupied by men for a very long time. We must monitor electoral processes to ensure election fairness and transparency. Tonight, we are looking at how do we as a nation and as a people ensure the effective implementation of the Act. My name is Samuel Wise-Bangwe and this is AYV on Sunday. Welcome to AYV on Sunday here on AYV Television on Channel 33 on DSTV Channel 399 on Radio FM 101.7 and all our different social media platforms, especially the AYV News Facebook page, where you have the opportunity to be part of the conversation. Drop your comments, your questions, but just ensure they are tailored to the issues being raised here tonight. As always, we bring people who are in touch with the issues we discuss. And on my panel tonight, I have Dr. Fatou Taki, the former president for 50/50 Group Sierra Leone. Good evening and welcome to the show, Dr. Taki.
Good evening, Samuel. Good evening, viewers.
Right, I have the Director of Gender Affairs at the Ministry of Gender, Charles Vandi. Good evening and welcome, Charles.
Yeah, good evening, Samuel. Good evening, everyone.
All right, I have the Executive Director for the Institute for Governance Reform, Andrew Lavalley. Good evening, Andrew, and welcome.
Good evening. Happy New Year, viewers and listeners.
Right, this is your first after a long time, including Dr. Taki. All right. I also have on the panel Millicent Kabo, the Principal Public Relations Officer from the Human Rights Commission, Sierra Leone. Good evening and welcome, Millicent.
Good evening, Samuel. Thank you for having me.
All right. Let's start off first, Dr. Taki. Let's put this effort to interrupt the gap between men and women, the gender gap. Let's put it into context now with the new law. What does it bring to the mix? Because I was reading a report done by the World Economic Forum, and it says the world still has about 136 years to close the gap. So let's put it into context. What does it bring to Sierra Leone?
Okay, thank you, Samuel. It has sort of shortened the gap. It has given the space now and the platform to jump up higher to where women are anticipating and hoping to be in Sierra Leone. So the first thing I think I would want to do is to say that it's been many years going. For me, my personal view, it's been a fight really since post-independence Sierra Leone. So if you listen to someone like Ella Koblo-Gomama as the first, and I think the old woman at the time, and the speech she made at the time, it tells you she was well before the time, and it seems quite contemporary if you listen to to what she has said. And it's been a kind of intergenerational, I mean, this is 60 years plus a fight and a battle. And it's been a battle fought by both men and women to get us to the stage that we're at. So and some people have lost their lives, and some people we've lost many who were part of this battle. So I would want to really pay homage to the ones who started the building blocks for us, both men as well as women. And getting to where we are now, we're extremely grateful. We thank President Bio. I think this is something that his mother would be proud of him. I believe his wife is, and I surely would think his daughters would be really happy, and sisters and people who are female who he has around them. Just because he has done this. Now, I'm going to give you two analogies, right?
Go ahead.
So one is like you're having a football match. And we've had, over these 60 plus years, we've had many defenders, we've had many attackers and midfielders. And we're at the point where from 2018 to now, you've had many midfielders who have been passing this ball. So you've had people who have been they've had a red card and they've been out of the field. And so we get to the stage where the minister and her team have been number 10. And, from the MPs, going in there, and the women there being defenders who started the ball rolling, going there. And then we got a very astute number 9 to score the goal for us. So that's, I don't want to bring in the Man United Arsenal, let me just watch, but something like that. Another thing is like a long pregnancy. And at the end now we see some respite. You breathe in and you breathe out, you exhale. That after such 60 years plus pregnancy, looking after this child, and getting to the point where you've had people, so this is really, it's not the natural birth. This is a surgeon who came in, and with a surgeon assistant, and we have a child. And where you're saying now, the question you asked me, is now we have the child. Normally in the labor ward, once they've done it's passed on, that baby now is passed on to the pediatric doctor, the nurses to look after. And this is where all of us we need to make sure it's implemented to the book. The gap it's caused. One, we will now have a stop to the question, where do you man them? Because for every time, and besides I saw your intro, it's very it's a succinct way. It's the minimum of. It doesn't say 30%.
Right.
It's a minimum of. So that's the cut-off line. It cannot be
below that.
So that, and it's for every sphere of where we find ourselves.
Right.
So it now puts us to the position where men as well as women have to think of how we can fill this so that we go with what the law now says. So breaking that question, what's the human and they? Now we have to find
I'm curious. This child that is being born, through the help of a surgeon.
Yes.
Do we have the environment, for nurturing this baby, so that at the end of the day, we all will be proud that yes, we were there when this child was born.
This baby is 60 years plus overdue. 60 years plus overdue, and I can categorically tell you that there is the environment.
Right.
And now that there is a law, even if we want to perceive and think that there is not an environment, we have to make the environment.
Right.
Because the law now tells us that the environment has to be there for our boys to be able to walk alongside our girls, for our girls to be able to see and nurture what they have and go for what they would want to be, and not something blocking them because we don't want women to be in particular places.
Right.
So this is going to break that gap. And I think now the naysayers and the people who had no trust that this will ever happen, I think it's a whole retuning now of the mind for them to accept that this is a situation that we find ourselves in, and this is a situation that we have to make thrive. And once we implement this, I can assure you we would see Sierra Leone prosper.
Right. Let me bring in Charles from the Ministry of Gender. When this fight was ongoing for us to have a law that gives an opportunity to women to be included in whatever sphere we are in as a nation. And now, the law is there. Now the president has signed it. We now go into implementation. What are the mechanisms already in place from the ministry? Were you looking forward to saying, we're waiting on the president. We've had the policy launched in 2020 of December. Were there tracks laid for the implementation?
Yeah, thank you very much, Samuel. I think in the first place, let me thank the cabinet that is headed by His Excellency the President to have actually listened to the Ministry of Gender and Children's Affairs from developing the policy framework, as you've mentioned, that was launched, which provided the guide and the framework for us to develop the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Act bill. That bill actually sailed through cabinet, which was chaired by His Excellency. So we say a very big thanks to them. And when eventually the bill got to Parliament, we actually saw a lot of support across party lines and from the leadership of Parliament, save one issue. There was this aspect about whose seat is going to be given up for women, especially when the first bill that actually got to Parliament had a provision that spoke about reserved seats, that X% needed to be reserved. So, those questions kept coming. But then Parliament, in their wisdom, requested that the ministry do further consultations, and we did a lot of consultations, and that report was presented to Parliament again. A lot of people were saying, why is it that the gender bill that has been in Parliament before other bills, they have now sailed through Parliament, and the gender bill is still in Parliament? People talk it was another gimmick that was going to happen.
Is that another result of previous experience?
Previous experience and other things, because 2011, we did a lot of things on the eve of election, hearing about private member motion and all of those kind of things, and everything collapsed that way. So when we got back, we said we were waiting for the public elections bill to sail through Parliament so that we know which mode of election and how the mechanisms were going to happen. And the ministry did not do this alone. We were in consultations with both bills from the Electoral Commission, which is the public elections bill, and that of also the one that was coming from PPRC. So you realize that you had the minimum of 30% quota in the public elections bill, and you also have minimum 30% in all political level structures in the political party structure. So we were working in tandem with them just to ensure that we don't miss out. Because when you want empowerment, it has to be holistic. So that if the political party structures themselves are not gender responsive, it becomes difficult. Like you are talking about the climate.
How critical that is right now. Looking at the political parties, for example, with their, with the constitutions they have right now, are there provisions in those constitutions supporting the Gender Empowerment Act?
Well, you can reference that. We just want to look at a baseline of 2018 manifesto that political parties put forward, and each one of them you have provisions of gender equality and the empowerment of women in those political manifesto for 2018. And I can also tell you that 3 or 4 of these political parties have a gender policy. And those gender policies is about the implementation and the goodwill of the leadership of those political parties. But I can also tell you that it's not about the climate. Our Lord Jesus Christ was born in a manger. Look at that climate. Somebody that now becomes a kind of intermediary to God for us to worship. So Sierra Leone here, whatever the situation, even when you cannot afford a Pampers, but if you can afford something that you can protect your baby, I mean, just keep on going. This is what we want to tell everybody. So coming to your question in terms of looking at whether we were waiting for the signing, we were not waiting for the signing.
What have you done?
No, the moment that bill on the 15th of November 2022, Parliament passed it into law, work started. What we have done, there are structures mentioned in the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Act, i.e., we have to establish the Gender Steering Committee. We have to ensure that MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies set up gender units within their outfits. So we have conveyed 2 meetings of ministers, permanent secretaries, and even planning directors in those MDAs, though all of them did not attend. But now the information is now resonating well that they need these structures to be in place, and that the steering committee, we have even developed what we call a terms of reference that is going to guide this running of the steering committee. We have also gone ahead to develop a draft implementation plan of this law, because we eventually
would I be safe to say, for example, if AYV violates this very law today, I mean, tonight, let's just say tonight, would the law come into effect?
Yeah, the law has provisions for sanctions.
So why I'm asking this question?
So the reason why AYV cannot violate this law is the fact that the law even talks about private bodies.
Why I ask the question? We'll go to that 25 and 30% should make up of that. Why I ask the question is, I mean, as a nation, we've enacted the law. It's beautiful. All of us are. So do we go back to say, oh, Mr. President, do we have to increase this number now? We know we have a few. Do we have to ensure that at least we have 30% in cabinet at this point? I mean, it's the law. Do we start there?
No. So what is happening, apart from the law, the minister is developing regulations to ensure that this law is applied to the fullest. So that regulations is now being worked on. And once that regulations enter into force, I mean, the law, somebody, just after President signed, somebody asked me whether President Bio tomorrow morning is going to ensure that he now starts appointing women, reshuffle and get more women. I mean, the law is not retroactive. We are looking forward to the June 2023 elections. We cannot accept anything below minimum 30% in all of the provisions, especially for elective and appointed.
So until the elections
for the institutions, public and private institutions, it's work in progress. Because we have to ensure there are institutions who only have 15% representation of females. They have now to ensure that they put mechanisms and measures in place to ensure that they meet that threshold of minimum 30% of either gender. So a lot of work is being put into play, and we as a ministry, we are not sitting by. We are going to work with all of our partners. I mean, we did not do it alone. Dr. Taki just mentioned that it's over 60 years. I mean, it depends on which school of thought you are coming from. There are several age dimensions to this fight, what we have been doing. And the fact that one thing that Parliament, let me just bring this. The bill that Cabinet approved spoke about that presidential appointments shall ensure minimum of 30% representation. But when we got to Parliament, this is where we have another work, Dr. Taki and others, which the Constitution gives absolute powers to the president to hire and fire. So Parliament said we cannot make a law that is going against the Constitution, which is a ground norm. So they said the president may take, because today President Bio may be gender responsive, but then who is coming next after President Bio may say, you want to usurp my office as per the Constitution. So which is why some of those 1991 Constitution that we actually submitted recommendations to change certain things, that Constitution can become a Constitution that works for men, women, boys and girls. At the moment, the Constitution is mostly working for men and boys and not women, until some of those important clauses are changed in the 1991 Constitution.
So in essence, what are you saying? So if, I mean, well, according to the Act, it's discretionary on the president. Is that correct?
Yeah, may take. May is yes.
But I mean, the law is not taking the powers of appointment from the president.
Not at all. He can even appoint 70% of women.
Right.
In ministerial, ambassadorial, and other places.
So the president will not be violating the law because
we are going to celebrate any political party that is going above 40%.
So we're saying if the president does not It will not be violating the law because it is discretion. Is that what we're saying?
I think knowing what President Bill presided
It's not
over
necessarily
in
about
cabinet.
President Bill. It's
Yes.
about the presidency.
No, I think it's about the presidency. Our hope is there is going to be midterm and annual review of this law. Our hope is once we do all of those reviews, recommendations may even come forward to suggest that we need to review the law and even make it. I mean, Senegal is on parity law, Samuel.
Right.
Senegal is parity. Even when women got 43%, they wanted to go to court for the remaining 7%. So this one, we are also saying we need to ensure that all of us put our hands on the deck to ensure that this groundbreaking legislation actually works for women, and the benefits are going to be a multiplier effect on families that will look at men and women. So that is what I will be looking at.
Yes.
Constitutional review process,
Right.
of which a lot of these recommendations were there. So we'd also expect, as we're progressing, we would really want to see us progressing now and with the progressive laws. So I want to believe that this is going to come in to work with some of the laws that are being made now in piecemeal would actually eventually work when the Constitution is being reviewed.
Yeah. The Constitution is already being reviewed, like you said, and we're accepting bits and pieces. I mean, doing
well,
the piecemeal
the holistic
approach.
review had not been done since.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me bring in Andrew. Andrew, first off, let me get your precursory remark on what do you think this particular law, what does it bring to the community in general, and how do we see women in terms of leadership, in terms of carrying them along and then playing the vital role needed for national development?
Yes, it brings quite a lot. But let me just start by associating myself with the comments made by my colleagues earlier, Fatou and Charles, to thank the government for this transformative, groundbreaking, I would say, piece of legislation. It's really a way of saying we need to bring 52% of our population along. We bring them on the development agenda. And particularly, I would like to thank the Minister of Gender and Children's Affairs, Manti, that has really walked the talk to bring us this far. And of course, members of parliament, both SLPP and APC. You know, sometimes we fail to realize the cost of development. If we are saying 30% of women should come to parliament, it means those MPs are sat there. Some of them, well, maybe reluctantly agree that we are ready to give our seats up. And I think we should, I don't know who was it in the US that did some work. There's some work about how do you, the best people you need to recognize are those who know that if I do this piece of legislation, it will affect me. So I think you can say everything, all what you mean about APC and SLPP and NGC and C4C, but this one is really worthy of special notice. And why is that? If we have 52% of our population that are women, I would just like to bore people with some statistics.
Go ahead.
And that will show where we are and the level of effort that is required even for us to achieve 30%. If we have 13% of women in cabinet today, it means we need over 100% increase of that number. If we have 12.5% of women in parliament today, it means for us to achieve 30% of women in parliament, we need to go at least 150% of that number that we have in parliament. Only 12% of women are in local councils. It means we have to go at least 150% of the number. And that's why Fatou's point, are women ready? Of course they are ready. That we are here today, it means most of the mistakes are being made by men. So let us do the mistakes together.
So how do you describe that readiness you're talking about? I know, in fact, this is a conversation at some point I had with Dr. Taki. So when we criticize that, you've been preaching, for example, President Bill campaigned in his manifesto 2018 about minimum of 30% quota for women and all of that, and why is that not reflected in your cabinet? I tried. I appointed women. They turned me down. They didn't want to serve. So how do you describe that readiness?
No, so it means, yes, as Fatou said, women, they need to get off their comfort zone. The world of politics is a tough battle. It's a place where you get abuses, you get insults, you get attacks, sometimes quite unwarranted attacks. That's the domain, and that's why we kept it to be a man's domain. So, being ready means we should be ready to create the platform, to create the conducive environment for women to take part. I've interviewed quite a lot of women in my work who say, I will not go into politics because it's nasty. So the more we create situations such as violence, social media attacks, cyber attack. So for example, many married women will not like to go into politics because of the nature of the terrain in which that. But it doesn't mean, if you take examples such as the place of work, it doesn't mean that men are more qualified than women. Most of my bosses that I've really enjoyed working with are women. So, but we have had situations where even a couple of weeks ago, I have advertised position in my office where I find it difficult to get a Sierra Leonean man or woman to take the position. It's the same in mining companies. It's the same even in the public service, in the civil service. So the question is, there is a dearth of capacity, not just for women, but for men as well. So we cannot continue to keep 52% of the population, and we keep giving excuses they are not qualified. We've just spent 22% of our budget on education. I know we are not there yet, but we only hope that translates into capacity. But let me just say this. At IGR, we did the Afrobarometer study in 2020, and we asked citizens a question: do you think this whole thing that President Bio is talking about, gender, 30% quota, women's empowerment, how do you see it? Guess what? 93% of the country said it's in the right direction. And in 2022, we repeated that question. We asked, do you think government is doing well in achieving that? 76% of them said, yes, we believe government is doing well. This was way before the accenting of the bill. But 61% are still saying they are doing well, but they need to do better. So it means the country is quite conscious about the gap that needs to be closed for our sisters, aunts, and cousins to be brought on board. Maybe the last point that I will give, it's around the women in positions. So, Fatu, you and I were working in a consortium where it was a Standing Together for Democracy consortium. That was in 2018. And we did a research, and we asked, how many of you are ready to vote for women? It was 66% of people then said, we're ready to vote for women. We repeated the same question in 2020. How many of you are ready to vote for women? For women? 86% of citizens said, we are ready to vote for women. And we asked further, have you seen a woman in a community that you are ready to vote for? 65% of them said yes. So, this excuse, I think it's more of an excuse than the reality. The
question I want to ask. The question I want to ask, first off, I'll take you back to the issue of capacity. Yeah. I know the law talks about training opportunities for women. And so, I know you're coming up with regulations, but the policy and the law, there are no clear, I know the regulations would provide guidelines as to the implementation of the law. But what do we really have to train our women in? Yes.
Quickly. I need all of us to understand, especially, I'm speaking directly to women and young women, especially, and girls and boys, to understand. You need to be 18 to be able to register to vote.
Right.
I had a conversation with a group of young ladies yesterday, and they thought that you needed to have qualifications to be a member of parliament. My people, women, girls, you do not need. The only qualification that it says there, you need to be able to communicate in English. There's nothing even about numeracy. Need to be able, it's basic, so you can be at even MPSC level and go there with people who have PhDs and who are professors. So women and girls need to understand, because before they say women are not qualified, women don't this, women. No. Please, if you're 21, you're qualified to contest for being an MP. I think 30 is for local head. You can be a head man or head woman if you're age 30. And of course, 40 is for presidential. So if you're 40 and above, you stand a chance. But that MP where you says elective, there's nothing there for any qualifications for local council.
Academic qualifications, you
Nothing,
mean?
no academic qualification.
Right.
You're Sierra Leonean, you attain this age, you can be there. So nobody can tell you, you need to speak English, you need to have masters and PhD to be able to go there. Because we have, we have a lot of men who are in these places, but yet once you start to talk about this empowerment thing, they say the elite, and the elite is accusing women of being educated. So there's no point you have to apologize for being educated. There is no point. Yeah? No, you don't apologize at all. You go for it. And believe me, like we say, you don't need to have academic qualifications, right? But if you do have, it enhances, it helps you being there. So a lot of the positions are there, if you really are not educated, you will not be there.
Right.
So if men tell you it's the women who are the elite, why are men not elite? So we need to be able to understand this, that girls need to, Andrew said, women and girls need to get out of the comfort zone.
Right.
We need to be prepared now. This is the time women wear trousers, so you tie your belt, you put the zip up, and you tie your lapel, but we need to go for them now. Because they need. If anybody, the political parties need to field their positions anyway, so they're going to go around the community.
One thing Samuel, President mentioned in the speech, he mentioned that he is now calling on women to start preparing their CV. So nobody is coming to tell you that people do not have the requisite qualification to hold certain positions. And one thing I have kept saying this for far too long. A man can be in that well of parliament for the 4.5 years and have not contributed to any debate. Nobody is paying attention. But if a woman sings no, these are some of the things.
No, I say I nay.
Yeah, I nay. So on the question of even looking at Samuel, whether women will come up, I have heard from several political parties when this bill was passed into law, somebody is coming from party A, B, C, D. Oh, Charles, this is a great job. Now we can come forward. Our parties, our men can no longer elbow us because it's a mandatory thing that you need to put your list forward that will be minimum of this. So now you see a lot of women showing faces, and either for councillors, either for MPs,
and discrimination being criminalized.
Yes, so yes, even the violence in elections. So this is something.
The question I wanted to ask quickly, Andrew, before I bring in Millicent. When you talk about the surveys you've done, that people are saying they're willing to vote for women. If you go to a particular constituency, they will tell you, oh, yes, we've seen and all of that. But when they will not be directly voting, if at all, that is what, the Supreme Court at the end of the day, goes with. So how do we get women? Who we know are strong, who we know, for example, maybe in 5 constituencies at AYV, all women would be able to make it. But then, if we go by the PR, then the parties will...
It doesn't matter what is going to be the decision of the Supreme Court.
How does it work?
It doesn't matter what is going to be the decision of the Supreme Court. Sierra Leone has already started practicing the PR. For the mere fact that he said 30% of the electorate should be women, nominated should be women.
Right.
It's some form of proportional representation. So it's a minimum 30% quota. And I know there is that debate. I don't want to be another Edmond Abu. Yeah, but it's good for us to weigh the cost and the benefits of all what is happening. I know, Fatu, you are talking to young girls. Yes. We need to talk to young boys as well.
And men, yes.
Yes, and men as well. There is a tendency for people to feel threatened by this. And most times, the reason why we're having violence, we're having, hate, it's because people that are mediocre want to stay in control. And the only way they can fight is not to take the fight on a platform where ideas can be debated. And I think that I continue to say this, I am born of a strong woman. And many of my aunties are very strong as well. And so are many other women. So we have, I mean, you don't give us that crap. We have many, many strong women. If given the opportunity for them to come forward, they will definitely prove their mettle. So young boys, it means you have to work harder. If you look at the US politics for Barack Obama that is black, so I just read this Audacity of Hope. It means you have to be stronger. If for all job ads that are going in now, you hear people saying women are strongly encouraged to apply. Right. Do you know what that means? If you, a young man, gets 70% and a woman gets 70%, he will be taken. He will be selected. So young men have to do better. And you know what? So if you have that positive competition of young men trying to do better and women giving, how do you call it? Positive discrimination or affirmative action. Yes. It just makes Sierra Leone gets better. So it's a race to the top. It's no longer a race to the bottom.
All right. And from past experience, even appointive, I don't think you need highfalutin qualifications to be a minister, looking for my past record. So again, you know, people, young women and girls and boys, you know, should be vying for.
We'll get to talk about that and where do we put quality representation. I know the way she's there, included with the men currently. I know. Well, but let me quickly bring in Millicent from the Human Rights. First of all, what does the Commission? I mean, with the work you do around protecting the rights of women and girls, what does the Commission make of this new law coming into force?
Thank you very much, Samuel. The Commission highly welcomed the law, and then we see it as a progressive law, and the Commission has been involved throughout the process. The Commission was part of the committee working on the bill, and we had a commissioner representing the Commission in that platform. And also to show that we have interest in promoting the rights of women and girls, we have a whole directorate in the Commission, a Directorate of Gender and Children's Affairs, and we've been following the process through which the bill went through, and then we're happy to see this law passed, you know, in Parliament, and also to see the President signed it into law. I think the government has been making strides even before now, because in May 2021, when we had a review of our human rights record in the third Universal Periodic Review, among other things, Sierra Leone was rated high by member states for the repeal of Part 5 of the 1965 Public Order Act. The Hands Off Our Girls campaign received lots of commendation. We also have the ban lifted on pregnant girls to go back to school. It's called the radical inclusion, yeah. And then also the model courts for sexual offenses. So Sierra Leone was rated high in those areas, and you know, we have been rated, you know, as a country because of those steps that we have made. So coming to have a law like this that will further empower women, especially in political, mainstreaming gender in various sectors, and also saying that we have a whole committee in those institutions that will ensure that this law is not only in the books, but also to see its implementation. We welcome it as a commission. And so far, we are going to follow up the process. We're going to follow up the implementation of this law, and then we'll be working, like we've always done, with those key stakeholders who will be implementing this law. And what we do as a commission, we, as part of our work, we monitor human rights situations in the country, and then we come up with our reports. And most times we engage the institutions that we know are not going according to what is supposed to be when it comes to protecting, you know, the rights of citizens, of people in Sierra Leone. So we ensure that we continue to work with these institutions. But definitely, this is a progressive law, and we see the law as one that has a lot of opportunities for women, and not only maybe in court, the elite women, or, you know, but also other women who can have access to finance, for example. And also, as a commission, we see how the Public Elections Act, you know, for example, ties up with this gender law that will give more women opportunities to political positions, you know, within their political parties, to go to parliament, local councils, and all of that. And also we've seen another progressive law that was passed in 2022, which is the customary land rights law. And all of these things we've been paying attention to, and we look forward to its implementation, because I don't want to bore you, but I know all other speakers have said, you know, this is the right time for women, and we want to see women progress.
Let's talk about the model you have devised to monitor the implementation of these laws. So let's go to what the law is saying. If you're running or you own a private company, you have about 25 staff members, 30% of that should be, at least 30% of that should be women. How would you monitor those things in those institutions? I know you work mainly with public institutions. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, not really. We have a Directorate of Business and Human Rights that works mostly with private institutions, companies, and all private institutions. And then we've been having engagement with these institutions. We've been having trainings with them to see how they balance business and human rights, to ensure that in doing their business, they don't, you know, trample on the rights of employees. So I think we're going to use that model. We're going to use our Business and Human Rights Directorate to ensure that we monitor how these institutions go about in ensuring that the 25, you know, above 25%, you have to ensure that 30%, at least 30% is women. And we've built relationship with some of these institutions, so we're going to continue to engage them. We're still engaging more institutions, training them to understand that the business and human rights, that you have to complement both. The business and the human rights has to complement each other, because you don't want to have all the profits and then you don't care about the employer's rights and, you know, all of these things that the employer should benefit from. So we're going to work with these private institutions to ensure that if you have 20%, 25% or more employees, at least 30%, what the law says. So we're going to monitor all of that, and definitely we'll come up with our reports.
The other question I would love to ask has to do with how would you deal with the complaints of discrimination? Because this law has criminalized discrimination and violence against women. And these are things we've seen in previous elections. The 2018 elections, we witnessed those incidents, even with the rerun of the constituency 110 by-election. So how are you going to handle those things, the issue of discrimination and violence against women?
So actually, that's something the Commission will not condone. And it also depends on, you know, if people come with the reports to the Commission, because our work is two-phase. Sometimes people bring a report to the Commission and we investigate those reports, and also we monitor even what we see on social media, and then we go to people, we ask questions. We have a whole directorate on monitoring, and that we go out and look at those issues. So if the issue is brought to us as a Commission, what we normally do is we engage the respective institutions, and then we try to get their own side of the story. And it's not all reports that come to the Commission that is admissible. We have reports, we have complaints that come to the Commission that are not admissible. So what we do with those reports, we send them to other institutions. And also, if the matter has been reported, maybe the matter is in court, the Commission will not, you know, be involved in that situation. So, but if people come to the Commission and make a report, where we can, we would intervene.
All right, continue to stay with me. Let's quickly go back to Thursday, when the bill was signed by President Julius Maada Bio. Let's join Sally Fucheno-Kamara, who covered the signing ceremony and filed this report.
Prior to signing of the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Act 2022 into law, President Bio said the act will end gender imbalances with more inclusion, participation, and representation of women in politics and governance. He cited women are to be strongly featured in leadership positions, noting the time for closing the gender gap is now, as he believes There is no democracy without the inclusion and active participation of women in critical national decision-making processes.
I want us to put an end to the objectification and commodification of our women. The Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Bill has been a long time coming, as you all know. And let me say this: a society is only as free and empowered as its women are free and empowered. The key provisions of this law speak to the principles of inclusion, representation, participation, and a more responsive posture on gender. Of course, a lot of people have already alluded to this. At least 30% representation in cabinet. At least 30% representation of all appointments as ambassadors, high commissioners,
The Women's Empowerment Bill was developed in 2020 by the Gender Ministry, introduced to Parliament in 2021, and enacted by the legislature on November 15, 2022. The Gender and Children's Affairs Minister, Manti Tarwali, proclaimed that signing of the act into law by the President marks a new dawn for women that will meaningfully position Sierra Leone to a middle-income country with the provision of both political, social, and economic inclusion.
Why is it a new dawn in Sierra Leone for women? Because the change we want to see as women is here. It's real and it's tangible. It's not lip service. It's measurable change. It's accountable change in an inclusive and comprehensive way that will move women, us, rural women and urban women, from insignificance, meaninglessness, to acceptance of worth, of substance and of value.
This action is considered as a fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goal 5 to achieve gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. Salifu Nakamara, AYV News.
Right, many thanks to Salifu Nakamara for putting that story together. Andrew, let me ask this question. For you know, the law, we're all happy that we have this law. So there are provisions about equal pay, men and women, and the issue of 14 weeks of maternity leave and all of that. And but it also stipulates fine for employers who would violate that particular provision. But for people who would violate the issue of appointment, the elective decisions, and all of that, there is no clear provision of how that will be dealt with, how that will be handled. I know Vanny, you would want to come in, but let me hear from Andrew.
I think the announcement in itself, the signing of this bill, is inspirational.
Right.
It's a big source of inspiration for the country. I haven't read the bill back to back. I mean, with profit, I've read, just thumbed through it. But what I do know, we need to look at enforceability now, as my colleague from the Human Rights Commission was saying. We need to look at enforceability. And even before government starts enforcing, I think it's good for private sector, private businesses, MDAs, to do their own gender audit. If a 30% quota bill has been announced, it's good for you, be you in NACSA, be you in NEC, be you in PPRC, to ask how many women do I have now? Because it should change. It should change. So yes, it's good for us to look at issues like prosecution and stuff like that, but it means I think this should be a source of inspiration for institutional leaders, because it's a framework now that should be binding them. But I think the most difficult area, this bill, I don't know whether it's going to touch it. I think Charles will correct me if I'm wrong. It's on tradition and culture. I think we are trying to change tradition and culture from the fringes. In the North, I used to hear about Queen Alikali Fatima Brahma in the history of all women leaders in the 19th century. So, but we don't have any woman anymore. I don't know whether this quota bill will sometime apply to traditional rulers as well. Because the public domain is really small. I know we want to impact this on the public domain. It's really small. Even though the work is great, but 90% of the forces that determine how institutions are shaped, our behaviors in Sierra Leone are informal. Until and unless we touch informal institutions, I know it will be difficult to reverse this since we enacted the Local Council Act of 2004, the decentralization and the decentralization policy that followed that. There has been that increased desirability, so we cannot slip back. I know it will be difficult for any other government, even beyond President Bill, to say, no, let's reverse below 30%. But for us to accelerate progress, I think it's good we touch informal domains of governance, which I think is a bit absent in the bill. In terms of the spirit, it's been covered, but when are we going to have 30% of paramount chiefs in the northern region?
Charles, let me hear you on the issue of penalty for defaulters.
Okay, thank you very much, Samuel, for that question. You see, the way how the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Act is laid out, you realize that we just piggyback on the Public Elections Act for elective positions. So all penalties, you go to the Public Elections Act, which is suggesting, like section 58(2), which is suggesting that for every 3 nominations, 1 has to be a female. And I also keep telling people, it does not suggest that you have to have 2 male and the 3rd always have to be a female. That is not it. You can even have 3 females. You can even have 2 females, number 1, number 2 on your list,
it's a minimum.
and then 3rd, you put a male. So, I mean, these are all things we need to educate our people for them to understand that even the sequencing is not suggesting that 1, 2, the 3rd always has to be a female. No, that is not what the law states in the public elections.
Maybe we should have been specific. I mean, just to get the parties to.
Well, that is where the goodwill is. You know, I remember when President Bill was speaking, he said the population of the country is 52%
But the goodwill has never favored the women.
No. If you say the population of the country is 52% women, he even challenged that I have delivered what I promised you. With women now voting 52%, he said I should be home and dry. That was what he said.
Right.
So what we are saying, political parties have to be conscious that the number of women who registered to vote is a huge number. And the number of women also, in terms of the population of this country, I mean, we have done a lot of disservice before. We have now to ensure that so all of those wrongs that Dr. Taki said, for over 60 years that we have done, we need to rewrite all of those things and correct them now. So all of the penalties that relates to these elections, whether political parties or whatever, you check with the Public Elections Act of 2022. So which is why you look at section 2 of this law after the preliminary section, it's looking at, it's just saying, referencing the Public Elections Act. Because we never wanted any law, ours, to actually be at variance with the Public Elections Act of 2022. So if you don't see penalties like you stated, you see penalties for people denying people for access to finance, you see penalties for looking at employment thing and other things, but then that other one, we said everything needs to be transported to. We make reference to the Public Elections.
What I would tag to that quickly, it means then, if you look at the PA, the Public Elections Act, it means then, if a political party fails to produce 30% on the list of candidates for a district, you'll be disqualified.
There are sanctions in there.
Yes, your list will not be approved.
So, Andrew mentioned culture and tradition.
Yes.
If we go back to, I mean, our villages, where we come from, we know it is almost a taboo. For even in a gathering, you get a woman to speak. So how do we handle all of these things? What does the law say? You mentioned the issue of paramount chiefs. How do we get women to front that particular, leadership role in some parts of the country that for them, they are not. How do we handle those things?
We are getting there somewhere. You look at the long title of the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Act, when we are doing the legislative committee meeting. I want to really thank some of the members of parliament who were in that legislative committee work. They mentioned that leadership at all structures. And when you talk about structures in that long title, structures even include those traditional leadership. One thing we are still not going to wait, we will still continue to advocate for, is for us to change Section 8, subsection 2 of the Chieftaincy Act of 2009. If you say on one hand that those born in paramount chieftaincy homes have right to contest for paramount chieftaincy elections, then on another subsection you say based on the traditions and customs practice in that locality. It's like a clubber. You are giving one hand and removing it the other way. But this is something I think the northern women have started, and some part of the eastern region, they have started speaking up. Why is it that now you see women as members of parliament from the north, areas where it used to be very difficult for us to have female parliamentarians, but now you see the education, the advocacy, things will turn around. It may not be this year, but it will definitely change.
When we push for progressive laws like the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Act now 2022, when we push for these laws, do we take into consideration existing laws that prohibit, that will definitely undermine whatever law we come with?
Yeah, we do take cognizance of them, especially for the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Act. I remember some of the consultations. Some of the female paramount chiefs in Parliament said, "Why did you not include even quota for the female paramount chiefs to be in this law?" Not just looking at the others, but knowing fully, Samuel, we have to respect some of the other legislations and policies. You don't want to do anything that will bring a lot of Supreme Court should not be so busy every other hour interpreting a lot of these things. So what is happening? You need to get back to that parent law, the Chieftaincy Act of 2009, and review it. But then when we spoke to them nicely to say, let's start off with this, and then we can get to some other areas. Because if you bring in that, what are you saying? You are now like, you can have Mami Queens from the north and some parts of the east, but you don't have female paramount chiefs. So if you put quota, it is only the southern and probably Kenema district from the southern province and from the eastern province that is going to benefit from those women coming to parliament. I remember in 2017, with support from UN Women, we called all paramount chiefs to a meeting in Bo. I facilitated a session for them. I asked them, Moyamba district, when last did a female represent you in your as paramount chiefs from your district? Some of them put on bomb. Some of them said, I need to research, I can't remember. So that was the advocacy we mounted. We got PC Mimakajwe from Moyamba district said, yes, I'm going to run for it. We got PC Honorable Maltida Mina said, I'm going to run for it. We also got late paramount chief from Bomb. What's her name?
Madam Zokon Pandakemo.
No. Yes, there is a name. We also got her, and unfortunately, she did not win. But then that was a good try for us to have two women returning from paramount chiefs to represent them. And this is something that we need to continue, this kind of advocacy, to see what we can do. But yes, we look at other laws. And the important thing about this Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Act, my colleague here from the Human Rights Commission mentioned, you now see that gender mainstreaming is at work. We supported and we worked with the Ministry of Lands and Country Planning when they were doing the two bills, the Land Commission Bill and also that of the Customary Land Rights Bill. And then you have a whole section in the Customary Land Rights Act of 2022 speaking on gender equality. So whatever committee is now going to be set from chiefdom level, district up to national, at least 30% of those that sit on that committee to distribute land, there are going to be women. So women cannot be on that decision-making table, and then we begin to complain again. So this is why we want to ensure that a lot of things are being done. The Mines and Minerals Development Act of 2022, we have a whole section on women and children, how you can ensure that gender and social assessments are being done to assess the impact of your mining on women and children. So all of these things, we are doing them so that we do not just have a depository of one law that is called gender equality and women's empowerment, and that looks care of everything dealing with women and girls or women and children. But we now can look at the other existing legislation. So we speak to each other, and this is what our strength is going to be going forward. The mainstreaming approach is going to work, and we are also going to vigorously ensure that all of us implement the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Act.
Dr. Taki, how do we get, Samuel, who is married and his wife would want to go into politics, but then I have this feeling that, politics, for all you know, in fact, promotes promiscuity. I'm not going to allow my woman to, because at the end of the day, she's going to be promiscuous. Andrew also mentioned the issue of qualification for a job he announced. But also, if you look at, there are certain jobs that are considered to be, these are for the guys, the men. Say, tractor driving, for example, those hard jobs in the mining field and all of that, and some women would feel that they would lose their femininity. And so with all of these things at play, how do you get in to ensure that, these women are better enlightened to be able to go in for all of these things, especially now that you have laws protecting and giving them the rights to do so?
Samuel, when I said, you asked the question whether we were ready, women were ready for this, I keep going back that it's 60 years plus in the making. Over these 60 years, a lot has happened. A lot of advocacy has happened, a lot of enlightenment has happened, a lot of training has happened. So there's a lot of awareness. And you would have women who would not want to go into certain fields, even if they're appointed, might not want to go into certain areas. But you would have ones who would want to, who are ready and willing to go. So this, for me, it's a revolutionary move by the president. He made a promise, and he did it. Now it's side by side, as 50-50 has been saying over the past 20-something years. It's side by side, and it's about inclusion and access. And one thing, before I get to you, what Charles has mentioned, this law is not just about the 30% or the minimum of 30%. It has to do with health, it has to do with education, it has to do with land rights, it has to do with mining, it has to do with access to finance. So it's about inclusion and it's about accessibility at different levels. So whether at the leadership level, where you want to see a lot more women, middle level, low level, we want to see men and women working together. So in the event where you have a man who would not want the wife or sister or mother to go into any of these fields, for whatever reason you may have. So I think this is why I'm happy that there is a law, because sometimes having negotiations would work. So it depends on who you're dealing with. And again, that's why I had said, going back, I had said it's a whole recalibration of the mind and reset of the mind for men and boys to understand that wherever they find themselves, women and girls can be there. And for women and girls to also understand that they have to be accessible to men and boys. So, if on purpose you do not, say if the wife wants to go, I think on that level, like you made an example, a personal example of you not wanting your wife to be in any of these fields. I think the wife can try to convince you. But if the wife has strong enough the conviction that they're going to go there, and Samuel, I think it's really, I don't understand any man who would see, once a woman holds a position, you know that it's progress for the families and for people around them. their parents, their community around them. So what beats me is for a man, say have a partner or wife, and you don't want them to progress because of your own ego or insecurities. It's a problem, sir. And I think people like that's where the law comes in, for it to take effect. Because if the person then needs to go in, and there's negotiation and things, and Andrew said something about when you feel I think you're not able to do it, that's where violence and things, because you feel threatened. And I think, again, that's why, again, within this law, there's protection for women, which should minimize bodily violence, any form of domestic violence. That's why I said when the child is born, you pass it on now to the pediatric nurse and to the pediatrician so that you're able to, and those people are all of us. We need to make sure that the act is now being implemented fully. So if I find myself in a place where I see that what is supposed to be is not there, we're supposed to bring it up. We are supposed to help ourselves to understand women need to be in certain places, men need to be in certain places, walk side by side. By that, the advocacy that the ministry will be doing, the education that the ministry will be doing, so that men don't think that they're being challenged. But then we need to take ownership of this law to make sure it's effected well.
I asked this question because I think last
if
Thursday,
a man like you, I think you should go to prison if you don't want. That's the basic answer.
I asked this question because last Thursday, I co-moderated a debate for women in political parties. And the topic was, how would their political parties ensure the effective implementation of this very act? And leaders in political parties, women I mean, were saying, how should we implement? Let us beg the men. We have to beg them. we have to convince them. We have to get for beg them. Not to fit here, not to challenge. We get for beg them. I mean, these were the words of leaders, women leaders in political parties. So how do we then?
I am not one for massaging and begging. And now the law, in fact, gives me more of that right. Because if it's my right, I really should not see why I need to beg. We can have a conversation and you can tell me where I do not have the ability or I am not capable to be able to do certain things. But you cannot look, and the only reason is because you're female, you cannot be here. That is wrong. And this is where progress is. And if we're saying a systematic, and this has been done with precision, and this is why I said we had a number 9 who scored the goal and the surgeon who did the operation. When you find yourself in a situation like that, why would you beg? Why would we not have a conversation for you to tell me why I have to be or not? And for me, this is why, and for Charles, this is where, again, as citizens, we take ownership of the laws, but Sierra Leone, we just need to set few examples. So when we have a timeline, if you're working on this, and you said the Honorable Minister has been working on the guidelines, and we have a certain time where, whether it's corporate offices, whether it's within the government, whether all of this, we have a timeline. If you don't meet that threshold, an example is set of you. We just need to set few examples.
I admire,
everything would work.
I admire the audacity of your hope, your optimism, and all of that. But looking at, we go back to...
No, but the courts are there. So if you don't
that is exactly what I want to reference. You go back to the, whether it's domestic violence, sexual abuse, and all of that. We're seeing families compromising. We're seeing women telling us that, for my family name and let this thing not go before. Women are being abused in their homes. They don't come out, they don't speak up and all of that because it's, man. So if they are going through that, it's okay, it's normal. For us, how do we get all of these? Charles?
Yeah, so let me just share this for the listeners. In all of the 5 regional workshops that we held alongside with PPLC and NDI across the country, myself and the Honorable Minister of Gender and Children's Affairs, Honorable Manti Tarawali, I mean, we brought clear message to the political parties. For people saying, where are the women? Are they up to the task? we told them political parties also have a responsibility to build the capacity of their female folks. Because if you are sending people into meetings, and every meeting you send men, when they go, they learn and they get capacitated and they come back. So there are times when it gets to election is about winning. Then you start saying, this man has more of what it takes to lead and all of those. So we told them the role of political parties was actually explained. You need to go on membership drive. If a political party wants to ensure that their political list that they are going to submit for 2023 elections gets at least 30% representation of women, you don't just sit by. You now send your political ambition, what are your party manifestos and other things, then people can now buy and join your party. They need to go into massive recruitment of women. Women are there. Women are there. They are there somewhere. There is no gainsaying about it. We have a lot of women, in fact, more qualified women. But because this kind of platform was not laid before, I mean, people were just saying, oh, that game can be risky. The other thing also that we need to look at, I will not sit by as a female for my political parties to come and just tell my husband that I am going to vie for the 2023 elections. That negotiations needs to start. That I want to, now there is an opportunity, I want to vie for leadership position. And then you start that conversation. The political parties also can engage your husband to say, yes, we have identified this woman, you know, she is with us, and we want to entrust her with this kind of position. So there has to be a lot of ways for us to ensure that we bring. For the issue of violence, Samuel, this is something we have been toiling with. I witnessed a matter in court when the judge wanted to give the ruling on domestic violence. The wife said, who is going to look after my children? Myself and my children. So you begin to look at issues dealing with dependency. But then if you have something that is going to look at access to finance, if women are economically empowered, there will be less violence in the homes and in the community.
Let me just share this data, and it shows that women have for long been blackmailed by few men in power, not all men. Women have for long been blackmailed by few men in power. This is the Afrobarometer 2022. It says women, these are at the level of opportunities. This is before the introduction of free quality education. That women are less likely than men to have post-secondary education. 7% women, 20% men. Post-secondary education. Women are more likely to have no formal schooling. 46% of women have no formal schooling, and 34% men have no formal schooling. So this is the structure. And the large majority of Sierra Leoneans say women should have the same rights as men to own and inherit land. 78%. Women should have the same rights to own and inherit land. To be elected in public office is 71%. But the thing is, women are considered weaker in our minds. So what should change that? You know, there is normally a definition of institution. What do you call institution? People sometimes will look at institution as a building. No, institutions are the rules of the game that will restrain you, that will constrain you to behave in a certain way. And this is why, to me, I keep harping that we have introduced, I mean, this whole thing about gender, when you ask a lot of people in rural areas, they say, this is a white man business. They think this is a white man's affair. It's not our affair. So I think, Charles, I know you've been doing a very good job at that. How do we ensure that we put this on the lap of traditional rulers to actually own it and run with it? I know the difficulty has been, how do we get parliamentarians to strike themselves off their own seats? And some of them have done that. So I know it's possible. And it's definitely, there should be no argument about this. Because time and again, we've seen that inclusive institutions produce better and exclusive institutions are weaker. So for Sierra Leone to be a competitive state, we have to be inclusive. And we cannot continue to have 15% of people working, majority of them men, feeding the rest of the country, and you say, no, you need to go work for me, and you have to feed the family.
Right.
I think it's a good introduction of a new conversation.
Just coming in. What
Yes,
you
quickly.
said about the political parties. The parties now have to be proactive. You know, they're going to be searching for women all over the place now. And you see, because once there's an act like this, the law says. I remember some years ago, I met a lady who was physically disabled. And I met her in Addis, I think, and she represents Egypt. And she explained her story. I've also met a lady in Mombasa who was an MP. So because the law pushed the parties, so the parties now went into communities and looked for people and tried to engage them and to get them to be representatives of them. And this was one question I remember during the late Tola Thompson's time when the CRC, we asked for 50%. And they were asking, well, we'll not get 30%, I want to go for 50%. I said, but we have women, you have your supporters. Those who mobilize, those who cook. Then when they make a tell for owner, train them. Train them so that they can represent the parties.
Right.
So the parties now have to take the law now, mandates them to go out and look. So they have to be proactive, and they have to go and look out for persons with disability. They have to go and look out for youth. They have to go and look out for women to be inclusive.
Millicent, the human rights regime caters to the second generation of rights, the socio-economic rights. So this law is saying that access to finance for women should be a priority. And of course, there's a penalty for that. So how would you ensure that part of the human rights regime is protected and adhered to by those who should be providing the finances, the loans to these women?
So Samuel, like I said earlier, the implementation of this law, the Human Rights Commission will have to follow it through. But also the Human Rights Commission is also engaged in public education. So for people to know about their rights and claim their rights, I think they need to know about it. So what we're going to do as a commission is to also support the ministry, whose key role is to educate the public now about this new law, so people know how, especially the women, know what is in the law and how to benefit from this law. But also from our public education platform, we're also going to educate people on their rights. So if you want to claim the right to access to finance, women, they need to know where and when and how they can get these rights. We know before now, there has been bottlenecks for women to access these finances. So if they have the information now, we believe more women will go for it. And all other speakers have said the economic status of women will help to reduce violence. Already the Human Rights Commission, I think this new law will face the test of time in the 2023 elections. And already as a commission in 2022, December, when we commemorated the International Human Rights Day, we have focused on human rights and elections. So already the commission is looking at how do we get into the elections and how people's rights, will be protected during the elections. And now with this new law coming, we have women who will be going for positions, as stated, at least 30% for the various categories in the law. How do we ensure that these women are not intimidated? How do we ensure that the elections is violence-free? And how do we ensure that people, especially women, are able to come out to claim these rights? So during our commemoration of IHI Day in December, we had a panel discussion, and then we have gone ahead to start engaging or hearing from election management bodies. And we had a panel that spoke about the political environment. How is it going to look like, and how election management bodies are going to ensure that the election is violence-free. And also we had another panel that had a representation of a woman, we had a person with disability, and a youth. So all of these discussions we're having on the table, the Human Rights Commission has put it into perspective to see how we get into the elections, maintaining the rights of citizens and those who will be contesting, and especially our women. The president said it during the signing of the law that they're going to ensure that violence against women, those who will want to perpetrate violence against women will be brought to book. And so we're going to look at all of that. We want people to enjoy their rights as citizens. We want people to contest for the elections, especially women, and we want to see these women go into the elections, compete with the men, and win the elections without being intimidated, without customary laws or traditions or these barriers that have been there. So we're going to ensure that we build on our public education so that people understand what is in this law. And also we're going to use our regional offices across the country, because the Human Rights Commission is not only in Freetown. We have regional offices in Western Rural, in Waterloo, we have in Makeni, we have in Bo, we have in Kenema, and we have in Port Loko. So our teams are going to also engage on public education using the media and also community engagement to ensure that, firstly, people know what is in this law and how they're going to benefit from this law. And we're going to support the ministry with that.
All right. Well, let me run through a few messages because of time. I apologize, I will not be able to read all of your messages. Ibrahim Jakem, there's no better time than now to be a woman in Sierra Leone. Thank you, President Bio, for ascertaining your consent to the Women's Empowerment Bill. I indulge all my women folks to make use of this opportunity. Educate yourself. The time is now. Amara Alpha is saying, the signing of the gender bill into law by HU, the President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, Dr. Julius Maada Bio, is a clear indication that indeed the People's Manifesto of the SLPP and the new direction government of President Bio is at work. Honestly, President Bio is always making a difference in the history of our beloved country, Sierra Leone, and HE deserves more reward and praise now and henceforth. Congratulations. Newman Anthony Lavey is saying, the gender law is a good start. We are moving in the right direction. Good evening to you, Suleiman. It was deliberate and he was very passionate to give the women of Sierra Leone the empowerment bill. As a champion of human capital development, the president always believes that 52% of our women populace should now take the center stage in the decision making. Thank you, President Julius Maada Bio. Daniel Kamara is saying, I'm not going to take any personal attack. The guys on Facebook are fighting themselves. More like Warboy by Camera saying 30% minimum quota for all women, but women with disabilities are excluded and not much is given to uneducated women. Or is this law only for the elite or educated women? It's a shame because over 70% of women in Sierra Leone are uneducated, and these women who were pushing this law cannot cater for all women. Okay? Brother Samuel, women are winners and we must respect their rights. Trust me, Siseti Usman is saying that. Abu B. Kamara is saying SLPP power governments are good and approving laws without implementation. There is no better time than now. Okay, I've gone through that. I'm going to run through at most 5 more messages. We have many of them. Nasu Fofana is saying, can we use some instead of generalizing women? Who are these women being asked? Are you getting in contact with women-led organizations like 50-50 to find capable and battle-ready women? We can provide an entire cabinet list of women today if needed. This is a big win for our women who have been left out for decades. Eddie Grant is saying, Albert Joseph Foro is saying, Andrew, the statistics, my party SLPP gave you guys the opportunity to have the first female vice president in the person of Dr. Kadisisi, but okay, so I would leave it there. I would leave that message there. Now that Act has been passed and signed, any government that wins the 2023 elections should implement it full-fledged. This is about APC and SLPP. It is about our women getting what they deserve. They've been knocking for too long and finally gotten what they want under the leadership of President Bio. Masiri Jane is saying, I have no doubt on President Bio for signing the 30% gender equality bill because he is a real democratic president. Musa Masako is saying, to what extent can responsible persons and institutions ensure rural women are also affected by this law? So many messages, but let me run through 2 more because of time. All we need now is for it to be monitored, and congratulations, Mr. President, we appreciate you for this law. What of our own educated women? Ibrahim Kamara is saying we should give chance to women because we, the men, can't do nothing for the country. We, the men in Sierra Leone, we're corrupt. Men should step aside, please. Let us try women this time. Men are not competent since independence. Okay. I'll join us to say some. But yes, I mean, as we try to round off the conversation, let's put this into perspective as you would also want to respond to some of the comments. What would we, at this time, how do we lay the tracks for effective implementation? I mean, the reforms that we've been calling for, some of them have been legislated now, and laying the tracks to the effective implementation is what definitely will ensure a very good and conducive environment for women's inclusion, participation, and getting that conspicuous position in all that we do. I'll start with you, Dr. Taki.
It's not a perfect law. It's a very good start to having something. And I think quite a good number of people are asking about rural women. The Act says women, whether you're rural, urban, or in between, it says women. So again, I have got it out that to be a member of parliament, you do not need any form of qualification. You need to be able to communicate basic English. That's what you need. It doesn't even say you need to read and write. Yeah? So if we have people, whether it's market women who are professionals in what they do, whether it's an uneducated person, let us bring them forward. This is why I say all of us, whether this cuts across party lines, this is for the country. And if we have a law like this, if we know we have competent women who are mommy queens or who are leaders within their communities, let us bring them forward because we want to see them not just being leaders within their communities now, but let them serve and bring that leadership to nation building. Yeah? So all the people asking about rural women, persons with disability, women with disability, it says women. So whether you have a degree or you're at basic level or you have not gone to school but you're competent to do something, please come forward. If you don't want to come forward, we who are there and we see you as a competent person, let us put you forward so that you go and serve the nation. And when we're still talking about competencies, well, somebody did say some men, you know, and we've been going these 60 plus years. And I'm thinking a lot of the men are aware that they're not competent, but they're there, you know? So it's nice. Let us also bring some incompetent women and let's do it side by side now. All right. And let's see how
let me take this message from one competent man that I know. From Dr. Freddie Lawson. He's a lawyer in UK, and he's saying, the new Gender Act is welcome and it's a good idea. There is a lot of enthusiasm, hope, and wishful thinking being bandied about. What I have not heard or read about is the reality check. In essence, this action is similar to the affirmative action for black participation in the USA, which had many obstacles. My suggestion is for caution in understanding how this dispensation will be implemented. My concern is that of capacity. Sierra Leone is a developing country, and though women constitute 52% of the population, I'm not sure you can have able women ready to fill this gap in all aspects of society. The question is, what happens when you cannot fill the 30% gap in an institution or agency, etc.? Do you just recruit women just to satisfy the law regardless of requirements, just to fill in this gap? What happens when it's just impossible to get 30% women in an establishment? These are very important issues. Does the country currently have that gender balance to facilitate such implementation? Employment law is not as developed in Sierra Leone as in other developed countries, where civil legal suits can be rampant. What again I have not heard about are the limits and exemptions. This is a very important aspect in implementing such types of laws. While the whole idea is good, caution and objective judgments must be applied. Finally, I have seen a couple instances where this law conflicts with other existing laws. This will be a topic for future development.
I think Dr. Lawson came in late in this discussion.
Right.
No, because we've discussed this, and
these
he has
issues,
made it, made it clear. But let us start. It's a start. And you know, with this basic free quality education, I have always said it's not, you will not see the effect automatic. It's midterm to long term. And believe me, when we're implementing this, by the time that threshold time coming, we would have a lot more girls and women who would have the threshold of basic education to be able to fill in some of these positions.
Charles?
Yes. So thank you very much, Dr. Taki, for answering the issue of exclusion of persons with disability and rural women. I think that was very apt. Talking about it, Samuel, I will tell you the number of interest groups that met us. The women wearing hijab, they met us. Women with disabilities, they met us. So if you were going to look at all categories of women, then you were somebody, if one group was saying if we can have 5% of the minimum 30, I mean, how are you going to fragment?
So you don't categorize women.
You don't categorize.
It's
So it's women. I mean, if you get back to the TRC recommendations, which is under the imperative section, it speaks about women. So if we start from that point, what do we, as a ministry, we can encourage all women. If you are a woman wearing hijab, this is your time to affiliate yourself with your political party of interest. If you are a woman with disability, affiliate yourself with a political party. So when it comes, disability also has a huge population in this country. You can begin to say, oh, this party is more disability friendly than the other. So therefore, I think we can throw our weight behind that particular political party. But then also, it is very important, like the point I think he made on the comments. One of the discussions in Parliament when they were debating this bill, one of the MPs said, if I have an engineering company, I need a lot of geologists, I need a lot of this. I mean, look at all of those skills. Probably you don't have enough females to occupy them. But we are talking about institutions like Andrew stated, defined institution. You can have the human resource director, who is not an engineer, but contributing to the day-to-day running of that institution. That can be occupied by a female. You have other positions which may not actually be geologists. And in fact, like the president was quoting, the number of girls and women who apply for this year's engineering at Frabe College and even Mitimagai College of Education and other tertiary institutions. So meaning, those who are now veering into STEM, science, technology, engineering, agriculture, mathematics, as the case may be, you have an opportunity. So let's start and see where this will take us. And I think we are not in shortage of women in a lot of these places that we are talking about. And the basic qualification, you have to communicate in English. So even if my grandmother went to standard 5, in fact, by the way, they even speak better English than somebody who probably, we have seen some of the interns going, for them to even communicate well is a problem. But you can bring back that standard 5 auntie in the rural setting to hold a position in Parliament. Are all of our parliamentarians from Freetown? No. They all come from constituencies. Let's look within and bring these women. And talking about rural women or illiterate women being left out in this law, it's not correct. You talk about access to finance. How many microfinance institutions, the financial service institutions at kingdom level and everywhere, you look at them, women are benefiting from these women and their recovery is even higher than when they give it to men. So it's not just about urban women. You also look at the aspect dealing with the local councils. Are you going to take Dr. Taki, a lecturer at Frabe College, to vie for a councillor position in let's say she comes from a village from Kailam, to be going there to attend sittings? No, you have capable women in that world that can come up and they know the actual issues that they need as part of development of their community. So the question about saying, I think that question went, the first time I heard about where are the women, when we had the Chief of Human Rights, 2005 in Napsi, Benedict Sano, there was a Liberian guy who was saying, where are the women? You are saying 30%. No, we have a lot. We even are saying, when we met with the political parties in all of these 5 regional headquarters, if you say you need 100 women. We are going to capacitate 300, and you have the headache of choosing them. Let them just identify the women, because now we have worked with partners. They have developed training modules to capacitate women. Women are there already. Samuel,
let me bring in Andrew.
Thank you very much. You know, the overarching concern, I mean, it's a very good mixed bag of text messages. The overarching concern of people, I mean, which I definitely entertain, is this should not be a box ticking exercise. We should not just be ticking boxes, and we should not be trying to, you know, play to the gallery of international community demands. While I sympathize with those positions, it is useful to understand that two significant things have happened. One, there is a law now that is saying, for whatever we now have relating to women, give it 100% and more. This law is not 30%. It may be 30% of the whole, but for women, it's more than 100%. And the second thing is, you know, if this law takes effect, say for example, women in minority areas, if we say we're going to select 30% of women in the South, say for example in Bo, if APC is going to develop a list of 30%, you'll have a woman in an area where a political party is weak representing them. You'll have a Timni woman representing SLPP in the North. You'll have a Mende woman representing APC in the South. So for those who are saying, no, you know, where are the women? Just give up your seat, and then you'll see if there's no woman qualified for it. It's now 21 years since the war ended. We've been rebuilding this country, and the question we need to ask now, upon reflection 20 years back, what kind of society have we been rebuilding? We went to war in the 1990s because the state was not working. We had a governance system that was generating poverty. We haven't fixed that. So what this law is saying, let us retool ourselves differently. Let us create a kind of, you know, I mean, the gender policy is a whole human resource policy. Let us create a human resource that can deliver good governance, that can deliver inclusive economic growth, that can deliver inclusive governance, inclusivity. So the kind of tools we've been using to develop, to rebuild Sierra Leone has not been working. So back to the text message that says, where are the women? But where are the men that have been ruling? So we need to retool ourselves and do things differently. I think we can, the misgivings definitely are something that are worthy of special notice, but I think the more we dwell on them, the more we fail to realize what opportunities exist for us to tap into.
All right, Millicent?
Okay, thank you, Samuel. For us, again, we welcome the law, and as a commission, we're going to monitor and we're going to support the Ministry of Gender and Children's Affairs in the implementation, and then we'll continue to get involved in the processes of the implementation. We're going to monitor not only through meetings probably or formally as they will be invited to, but also we're going to look all other platforms, and we're going to get reports from our regional offices. Already the Commission is having a whole plan on the election specifically, and I'm sure this law is going to attract more women to go for positions in the 2023 June election. So we're going to ensure that whatever plan we're coming up with, we create a special provision for women and see how we follow women through these processes to ensure that they benefit from this law and their rights will not be impeded.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Millicent Kagu from the Human Rights Commission, Andrew Lavalley from the Institute for Governance Reform, and, Charles Vandy from the Ministry of Gender. Yes, Dr. Taki.
No, I had said at the start, it's an intergenerational fight. And some people lost their lives along the way, and you know, I want to pay respect to people like Dr. Alusain Fofana, who was there, Hadi Sharif, Combo Smart, some few people, of course, Charles, who is here with us, Auntie Shali Bujama, Amy Smythe, the first gender minister. And I think all other subsequent ministers who are there, the directors who have been there, the civil servants who have been there, late Elizabeth Alpha Lavali, you know, these are people who Gladys Jusu Sherif, Yasmin, Nana Pratt, 50-50 in generals, Zaina Bangura. I just want to bring Dr. Kadisisi, Bernadette Lahai, of course, who is still there, Dr. Aisha, the technical committee, all the past members of lawyers. They have been there interpreting and working with us to do this a lot. Nasu, late Antiabato, Marcella, CGG, you know, and Valnora. The fight continues. The fight continues. And we want to say thank you for them. Over these 60 years, these men and these women have done little bits in their corners with draft, redraft, draft, and redraft until where we are now. And we're grateful and thank the minister who has been opportune to be the person to make this happen, and the president, of course, who committed himself.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fatou Taki, former president, 50-50 Group, Sierra Leone. You know, I used to make a mistake like 50-50 women's group. No. And then Dr. Fatou Taki told me, no, don't do that. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Taki. Until we meet again, the show has been AYV on Sunday. My name is Samuel Wise Bangura. Take care of yourself and have a lovely night.